somewhere near the old forest range. They showed a satellite image of the mountain, even blurred through studio graphics. I recognized that ridgeline immediately. My stomach dropped. I haven't heard its name spoken on the news in years. And the mountain has a reputation, whispered about in neighboring villages. In the early 1990s, a small plane went down somewhere in this forested basin, roughly 37 kilometers north of my hometown. It had been on its way to the capital when it lost contact over a sparsely populated stretch of dense, forested highlands. On board was a small group of officials and staff. Initial radar readings suggested a sudden and dramatic loss of altitude, consistent with a possible impact in remote terrain. There had been no distress call, no final transmission. The first search teams went in soon after. None of them returned. The wreckage, the people, everything vanished as if swallowed by the earth itself. There had been more attempts after that, each team more cautious than the last. None came back either. The government eventually offered an explanation. The plane, and probably the missing searchers as well, had been claimed by the forest. The forest was a trap. A maze of hidden marshes, sudden flash floods, and unstable slopes ready to slide at the slightest rain. The dense canopy made aerial searches useless. The forest swallowed sound and light alike. It was the kind of place a person could walk into and never walk out. Only a few months after the last rescue team vanished, another was being assembled. Not to locate the plane this time, but to find the missing searchers themselves. The mission was simple in theory. Retrace the steps of those who had vanished, follow the signs that they left behind, and bring back whatever traces of them that we could find. My cousin, Anton, called that rainy afternoon and asked me to join in the search. I had camped in the forest around the mountain before, and he figured that I knew the terrain. I hesitated. I had never been a part of a search and rescue operation before, but still I told him yes. And the team was a motley mix. A handful of uniformed rescue officers, seasoned volunteers who had been on minor missions before, and locals like me who knew the areas better. Together, 20 of us stood ready, small enough to move quickly, but enough to cover the treacherous slopes and deep valleys that had claimed previous searchers. Sensing my unease, my cousin clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Relax," he said. "We don't need miracles, just more eyes and boots on the ground. With terrain this rough, every able-bodied person counts." "I'll do my best," I said, still unsure. "Yeah, just stick with your group and follow instructions. You'll be fine." A tall, burly man approached us from across the clearing. Anton stepped forward and shook his hand. "Kamal, this is my cousin," he said, turning slightly and gesturing toward me. "He'll be joining your team. Knows the southern part of the mountain well. I figured he could help you with navigation and ground searches." Kamal looked me over for a moment, assessing. I nodded and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, cousin." His voice was calm and friendly. I noticed a faint accent when he spoke. "Kamal's leading the ground unit," Anton explained. "You'll be moving on foot through the southern sector. Armin and Rian will take to the choppers once the weather clears enough for a proper aerial search." They're the lucky ones." Kamal let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. "Must be nice flying over all this instead of crawling through it." Anton smiled faintly. "Oh, somebody has to do the crawling." He checked his watch and took one less drag from his cigarette before flicking it away. And then he turned to me. "If you've got questions, ask Kamal. He's been through this kind of thing more times than he'd like." You ever seen a dead body before? Kamal asked me suddenly, flashing a grin. I hesitated. Kind of. Anton shook his head. Kamal raised his hands in mock surrender, still smiling. Hey, I'm just saying, better that he hears it now than freezes up later. You should know what we're dealing with here. I don't listen to him, Anton said to me, checking his watch again. All right, I should head out now. See you tomorrow, boss, Kamal asked. Probably not, Anton replied. I got a few other things to deal with. He paused and then nodded toward me. Hey, Kamal, keep an eye on this kid for me, all right? He shrugged, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Oh, relax, I'll treat him like a princess. You be careful, all right, Anton said, fixing me with a firm look. Do your best out there and help these guys. I'm counting on you. The weight of his words settled in my chest, and suddenly the situation felt far more serious than it had a moment ago. As Anton walked away, the forest seemed to close in around us again. The drizzle thickened, tapping softly against leaves and gear. Kamal gathered us inside a bigger tent. A laminated map was spread across a folding table, its corners weighted down with spare batteries and a radio handset. I edged closer, watching as he traced lines across the map with a thick finger, outlining sectors and ridgelines that I recognized from years of hiking the area. We're combing the southern edge first, he said, tapping the map twice. We move slow, stay in visual range, calling anything that looks off, even if you're not sure. And no one wanders. Oh, there's a small river up ahead, I said, pointing to an unmarked stretch of the map. It winds through the valley along the base of the eastern cliffs. If we follow it north, the cliffs gradually level out into marshland there. It'll bring us closer to the last known coordinates before the flight lost contact. Good job, kid, he said, giving my shoulder a solid pat. There's an open grass field near the western edge of the mountain though, somebody added, about 4 kilometers northwest of the river. Kamal studied the map carefully, tracing the ridges with his finger. We need eyes on both sides, he said quietly. Hassan, take some men and comb the western edge. Check every 10 minutes. The rest of us will sweep along the river. The guy named Hassan nodded. I wouldn't split a team normally, but here, it's the only way to cover ground safely without leaving blind spots. Radios were passed out and clipped onto straps. Call signs were confirmed. All right, Kamal said quietly. Let's move out. As we stepped into the forest, the village sounds faded behind us. The forest swallowed us quickly, leaves closing overhead, the trail narrowing into something darker and less certain. It took us nearly 3 hours to reach the heavily forested high ground along the southernmost stretch of the mountain. Every step had to be measured. One slip was all it took to send someone sliding. The dirt path climbed gradually but relentlessly, slick with mud from rainwater that trickled down through the dense canopy above. By the time the rocky cliffside finally emerged ahead of us, half hidden behind a thick wall of tangled vegetation, the light had begun to fade. After a brief survey of the terrain, Kamal raised a hand and called us to a stop. This was where we would split up. Kamal pulled Hassan aside and spoke to him quietly but firmly. Radio in every 10 minutes, he said. Once we're on opposite sides of this mountain, the signal is going to weaken. If you miss a check-in, we turn back. Hassan nodded as he looped a strip of bright neon orange flagging tape around the trunk of a tree that leaned heavily against the wet rock face. The colors stood out sharply against the dark greens and grays of the forest. We're gonna regroup here before sunset. Kamal said, checking his watch. No later. Copy that, Hassan replied. With that, we shouldered our packs and turned away from each other, disappearing into separate corridors of trees and shadow. The drizzle showed no sign of easing as we worked our way further around the cliff. It couldn't have been much past midday, but the low overcast sky and the dense canopy overhead dimmed what little light remained. Everything felt muted and gray, as though the forest itself were swallowing the day. My feet had started to go numb after hours of walking, the sensation dulled further by mud seeping into my boots and pooling around my toes. Every so often, Kamal's radio would crackle with static. Brief check-ins followed, clipped voices exchanging positions before dissolving back into noise. Each transmission felt slightly more strained than the last. And Kamal slowed and switched on a high-powered flashlight, its bright beam cutting through the rain and sweeping across the forest ahead of us. Trees and undergrowth sprang briefly into focus before vanishing again into shadow. The cliff gradually sloped downward until we had reached the river, its surface roiling with rushing water and frothy white currents. Mud squelched underfoot as we carefully picked our way along the slippery bank, each step measured against hidden roots and loose stones. We head upstream now, I said, glancing at Kamal. He nodded and exchanged a quick look with the others before moving forward. You really know this place, huh, kid? He murmured, slightly out of breath as he stepped over a fallen branch. I shrugged. Just a camper's knowledge. I've hiked these trails enough to know a few shortcuts and safe spots, but I've never gone up the mountain. The slopes are too unpredictable. Well, that's gonna come in handy, he said, pausing to unfold his map. He traced the river with a dry erase marker, noting the bends and elevations. It had been nearly 5 hours following the river when Kamal's radio crackled, followed by the familiar buzz of static. Kamal, over. Hassan's voice came through distant and tinny, like it was bouncing off the trees. Can you hear me? Yes, copy. Kamal replied, keeping his tone calm. More static, and then sharp, high-pitched feedback hissed across the line. We found something, Hassan said. Everybody froze. Even the river seemed to quiet in the tense pause. What is it? Kamal asked, his voice steady below. A shoe and some torn clothing, bloody. No plane debris nearby. My stomach lurched. Any bodies? Kamal's voice dropped, careful, static, and then a faint reply. No, just pieces of clothing scattered all over the knoll. Too many to count. Kamal's fingers tightened on his radio. Photograph everything, do not touch them, not yet. You got it? Copy. Hassan's voice came through, shaky but clipped. Mark your position on the map and report back. The forest felt heavier now, every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch making my heart skip a beat. Hassan's report weighed on us like the dark canopy. The river's roar had grown louder, its surface rising ominously, nearly spilling over its banks as if reminding us the valley would not remain safe for long. We need to get to higher ground, fast, Kamal muttered, pulling the laminated map from his pack and spreading it out carefully. I pointed at the valley across the map. If we follow it and then cut left right about here, I indicated a turn, we can go around the mountain to the west. That should put us on higher ground and give us better reception. He nodded and marked the trail, studying it for a moment. Yeah, makes sense. We move carefully. Keep your eyes open, gentlemen. Stay focused. We started walking again, carefully picking our way along the slippery riverbank. Kamal kept glancing at his watch every few minutes, his jaw tight, as if the time slipping away made the forest feel heavier. When we finally reached the section where the river widened and the map indicated that we should cut west, a foul stench hit us abruptly. It was sharp, sour, and impossible to ignore. "Kamal, look!" one of the guys shouted. The rocky wall above us rose like a jagged and overgrown monolith, its surface slick and shrouded in dense vegetation. Far above, a thin veil of what looked like black smoke curled from a cluster of bushes at the edge of the ridge. Kamal pulled out the laminated map again, marking the location with precise strokes before grabbing the radio. "Hassan, come in. Over." A few moments of silence were broken by static, and then a weak, distorted voice. "Yes, here." "We spotted smoke along the eastern edge of the ridge. Can you see it from your side?" Another pause, punctuated by static. "Negative," Hassan said finally. Kamal rubbed his temple. "Can you check it out? We're at the base of the cliff. We will circle the mountain to see if there's a shortcut to reach you after sunset." "I guess so. I'll take a couple of guys and investigate." When we finally reached the northern face of the mountain, the terrain had shifted suddenly. One side sloped gently between two steep cliffs, the underbrush thick and tangled, roots and loose stones making every step uncertain. Beyond it, the ground dropped into a wide, low basin, dark and waterlogged, reeds and marsh edging the tree line, a relic of past landslides. Twilight was draining from the sky, heavy gray clouds rolling overhead, and one by one we switched on our flashlights as the dark crept in. Kamal studied the ground and then the sky. "If we push any further down there, we risk losing daylight and footing," he said finally. "We should regroup with Hassan up top. We'll work the valley first thing in the morning." No one argued. We climbed steadily after that. The higher that we went, the thinner the trees became, giving way to open grass and low bushes bent flat by wind and rain. Then the radio crackled sharply, breaking the quiet. "Kamal, come in. Over." Hassan's voice came through low and tight. "I'm here. Where are you?" A pause. Static hissed. "We're heading back to base camp." Kamal stopped walking. "What?" He checked his watch. "Why? We need to regroup first and move out together." We exchanged uneasy looks. We went up," Hassan said at last, "to the spot you mentioned earlier, on top of the ridge near the cliff." Kamal's jaw tightened. "What, did you find anything?" "Yes," Hassan said after a beat. "A human torso. It's been out here for a while." "Any sign of the wreckage? Anything at all?" There was a longer pause this time. The radio hissed softly. "Hassan, you there? Over." A breath came through the speaker, uneven. "I can't talk long." His voice sounded tight and strained. "We got a badly injured man. We're heading back to base camp now." "What happened?" Kamal asked. "Did you secure the remains?" Another pause. "There's something up there." Static broke through his voice. "It drove two of our men toward the edge." "What?" A pause. "They went over." For a moment, Kamal didn't speak, and when he did, his voice was flat. "Did you see them fall?" The static thickened, swallowing Hassan's words in bursts. You need to turn back. Go back the way you came. Do not go anywhere near the top. Hassan, you're not making sense, Kamal said carefully. What exactly Kamal, Hassan cut in. His voice dropped, barely more than a whisper beneath the interference. Listen to me. Get the hell away from that mountain. What the hell? Hassan. Only static answered. I realized something. It wasn't just interference, he had been whispering. Not from a weak signal, but like he didn't want to be heard. As if something was listening. That's not good. Somebody muttered under their breath. Kamal lowered the radio slowly. The muscle along his jaw tightened, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked uncertain. Thunder rolled across the sky a second later, deep and close, and a violent flash of lightning split the ridge above us in white. The rain came down harder just as the light began to thin, turning the slope into a thick sheet of mud and crushed leaves. What little daylight filtered through the clouds was already fading into a dull metallic gray. We're not getting back along that riverbank in the dark, Kamal said. Not in this rain, and we're definitely not climbing that ridge. He moved along the slope, testing the ground with his boot, studying the angle, the drainage, the tree roots jutting through the soil. About 20 meters ahead, the hillside leveled out into a narrow and natural shelf, barely wide enough for 6 or 7 men to sit shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't ideal, but it was stable, anchored by thick roots and shielded from the worst of the runoff. This'll do, he decided. We camp here tonight. We worked in silence, clearing debris and rigging a tarp between 2 trees, angled so that the rain would drain downhill. We drove stakes into the softer soil to secure it and set up the tents. Kamal unfolded his map and marked our position. He lifted the radio. Hassan, can you hear me? Over. Only static came through, thin and broken. The mountain or the worsening weather was likely interfering, or Hassan's team had already moved too far toward base camp. He assigned a rotating watch schedule after that, 2 men at a time. We don't wander, he said. If you need to piss, you wake somebody up and go 5 meters and no more. The rain drummed against the tarp in a relentless rhythm. Water trickled past the edge of our shelf in thin, muddy streams, carrying leaves and broken twigs downhill into the basin below. The forest had gone strangely quiet except for the weather. Somewhere above us, beyond the line where we had seen the smoke, the mountain disappeared into shadow. Kamal stood at the edge of the shelf, jaw tight, radio in hand, staring up at the slope as he tried again to reach Hassan and base camp. And then night closed in around us. I took first watch with Kamal not long after sunset. Neither of us had managed to sleep anyway. We spoke in low voices at first, and then less and less as the night deepened. He told me that he had been a doctor, but unfortunately his credentials didn't carry over, and medical boards rarely accepted foreign degrees. Handling the medical side for the search and rescue team, first aid, minor emergencies, whatever came up, was the best that he could offer here. Even without formal recognition, it was clear that experience mattered far more out here than a certificate. He didn't say much after that. When he did speak, his past no longer came up. His focus kept returning to the ridge above us. I could tell that he was replaying the last radio call in his head. Hassan's voice. Hassan wasn't inexperienced. He wasn't the kind of man to panic over shadows or wildlife. For him to pull his group back that quickly without regrouping, without confirming visual on the two men, that meant something had gone very wrong. And going up there now wasn't an option. Not in the dark, not in the rain. The slope between us and the ridge was already unstable. We had felt it shifting under our boots earlier. Attempting to climb without daylight or proper anchors would be too dangerous. When midnight neared, we rotated out without much ceremony. Two of the men replaced us on watch. I curled against my pack, my boots still on, the damp chill seeping through fabric and bone. Sleep came quickly. I woke to the sound of voices, low and muffled. At first, I thought it was the men on watch, talking beneath the soft patter of the rain, but then it came back. Hello? It echoed weakly off the ridge. Can you hear me? I forced myself upright and crawled out into the damp night air. For a moment, I saw nothing beyond the weak glow of a covered headlamp near the ground. The mountain loomed above us, a darker mass against an already black sky. The rain had thinned to a cold drizzle, steady enough to soak through fabric but light enough that the forest had gone quiet again. No wind, just the faint hiss of water moving through leaves, and the distant rush of the river below. Three blurred silhouettes stood further up the slope near the edge of the clearing. Even in the dim light, their rigid stances told me that it wasn't an ordinary conversation. I got to my feet and I hurried up the incline, my boots snagging in the wet grass as I climbed. By the time that I reached them, the tension between them was unmistakable. Kamal stood a few meters away with two of the men. The guy named Bhima was facing the slope, shoulders rigid, staring upward as if he expected something to move. "What's going on?" I asked quietly. Bhima turned toward me. His face looked pale even in the dark. "I heard someone," he said. Kamal didn't answer immediately. He kept his gaze on Bhima, measuring him. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked, calm but firm. "A voice like somebody was hurt. It came from near the top, from the ridge." He pointed toward the unseen cliff line. "You sure it wasn't the wind?" muttered the other guy whose name I could not remember. "There's barely any wind. A rain hitting rock can carry," Kamal said. "Water runs through cracks, it shifts loose stone. Sound, it bends on slopes at night." "It wasn't a rock," Bhima insisted. "It was a person." Kamal stepped closer. "Male or female?" Bhima hesitated. I don't know." "Was it one call or was it repeated?" "Just once, maybe twice, I'm not sure." We all stood still, listening. Nothing came. No voice, no echo. Just rain tapping against fabric and leaves. Kamal tilted his head slightly as if testing the air, and then he checked his watch out of habit more than necessity. "If somebody needs help up there, why haven't they come down to our camp?" he asked. Bhima swallowed, eyes fixed on the ridge. He tried to speak, but no words came out at first. I exchanged glances with Kamal. Maybe they're hurt and too weak to move," I offered. "Maybe," Kamal replied. "But we don't move on maybes in zero visibility on unstable ground." "But what if somebody's really hurt up there?" Bhima insisted, glancing toward the ridge again. Kamal turned slightly so that all of us could hear him. "That slope is slick. We have a fissure full of runoff next to us and a cliff face above. One misstep and we lose another man. If there's somebody up there, they're not going anywhere before morning. Bima shifted uneasily. Kamal lowered his voice, just enough to take the edge off, but not enough to sound unsure. We wait for daylight. First light, we assess and move properly, roped if necessary. No one climbs tonight. After a few seconds more, Kamal nodded toward the tents. You should rest now, he said to Bima, his voice gentle. You're exhausted. We began making our way down the slope toward camp, and Bima stayed behind a moment longer, still looking up at the ridge. But as I crawled back under the tarp, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness above us wasn't empty. It was listening and it was watching. Bima's words kept circling back and refusing to settle. Had he really heard somebody calling for help? What if he was right? What if somebody really was up there, hurt, weak, and we were down here doing nothing, letting them lie in the dark and the rain alone? The thought pressed against my ribs until it was hard to breathe. But then Hassan's voice returned to me, thin and strained through the static. They saw something that had frightened them. He had sounded terrified, not confused and not mistaken. Terrified enough to abandon the ridge and retreat to base camp without regrouping. That was in protocol, and that was what unsettled me the most. I closed my eyes again. Exhaustion swallowed me almost instantly. It felt like minutes later when shouting tore through the basin. A man's voice carried down the slope, warped by distance and rain. Bima, come back here, what are you doing? I jerked awake and scrambled out of the tent, nearly slipping in the mud. Cold rain hit my face. Near the edge of the clearing, two figures stood rigid in the dark, their flashlights raised, beams cutting through the drizzle as they combed the slope above. I hurried over, still half disoriented. What happened? It's Bima, one of them said, breath unsteady. He said that he saw someone up there. I followed their line of sight. At first, I saw nothing, only the black outline of the ridge. And then for a second, something shifted. A vague movement, too indistinct to name. He just walked out, the other man said. He didn't say anything, just started heading uphill. It's like he wasn't even awake. Where's Kamal? He's right behind him. Told us to stay put, said to not go near the top. The ridge loomed above us, silent except for the rain. What do we do? We wait, I said, though my voice wavered. I checked my watch. 14 past 4. We stood there listening to the rain and the wind pushing down the slope. Flashlight beams swept the dark and restless arcs. Then the fog began to roll in, thick and low, spilling from the ridge like smoke. It swallowed the upper slope first, and then it crept toward us until the trees around the clearing blurred at the edges. Minutes passed, and then something moved inside the fog. At first, it was only a distortion, a darker shape inside gray. Slowly, it sharpened into the outline of a man descending fast. Kamal. He stumbled more than ran, boots sliding in the wet grass. Even from a distance, I could see that something was wrong. His face was drained of color. Bima wasn't with him. Where's Bima? Somebody called. Kamal didn't slow. Don't bother packing, he said as he pushed past us. We're leaving right now. What happened? I followed him downhill. The others, wake them, he snapped, not looking back. We can't stay here. What about Bima? We're leaving, he repeated, voice breaking for the first time. He didn't even go back for his pack. Kept moving until he reached the lip of the slope where it dropped into the dark basin below. Only then did he turn. Move, now for God's sake, he called. his voice urgent, barely louder than the rain. We stood there a second too long, stunned. I didn't need to be told twice. I ducked into the tent, grabbed my backpack, and slung it over my shoulder. Behind me, the others were shaking the remaining men awake, voices low and frantic as zippers tore open in the dark. Kamal was already descending, heading back the way that we had come. It was almost impossible to navigate the forest with only our flashlights to guide us, the river raging somewhere to our left, and the wet cliff wall rising black and sheer to our right. Kamal fiddled with the radio, sending repeated calls to Hassan at base camp, but only static answered. Overnight, the river had swollen, its edge creeping closer, forcing us tight against the cliff. The bank had dissolved into mud that sucked at our boots and threatened to pull us off balance with every step. Ahead, the canopy thinned for a stretch, exposing a strip of dark gray sky still heavy with rain. Our beams of light felt small and fragile against the dark. By the time that we broke out of the trees, it was nearly midday. Every one of us was bone-deep exhausted. The sky hung low and colorless, and now the rain fell in heavy sheets, driven sideways by a rising wind that whipped through the battered trees. The schoolyard where we had set up camp looked smaller somehow, and empty. There was no sign of Hassan and no sign of the others. "They all just left?" somebody asked, disbelief hanging in his voice. Kamal grabbed his radio. "Hassan, where are you? Over." The tents were still standing. A few boxes of drinking water lay where we had left them. Cooking gear sat abandoned, a half-collapsed tarp flapping quietly in the breeze. I moved toward one of the tents. Inside, papers were scattered across the damp ground. Cigarette butts floated in shallow puddles. No, they hadn't left camp, I realized, every hair on my arm standing on end. They never made it back here. Somewhere out there, they were still in the forest. The search was officially suspended the following day. By then, the rain had turned the northern basin into a shallow inland sea. What had begun as a steady downpour hardened into something relentless. The following morning brought landslides along the lower slopes and sudden flash floods that tore through the ravines, dragging trees, soil, and anything unsecured into the valley below. Entire faces of the ridge sloughed off in the night. We were lucky that the landslides hadn't struck while we were camped on that northern slope. In the days that followed, additional choppers were dispatched to look for Hassan and the others, though each attempt was short-lived. The mountain had changed, the weather remained unpredictable, and they reported nothing. After that, no further missions were attempted. The terrain was deemed too unstable, too remote, and too costly to comb thoroughly. Entire sections of the hillside had given away. Trails disappeared overnight. Back then, we had no satellite mapping, no drones, no reliable way to scan such vast forests from above. Once the official statement was released, the matter was considered closed. If Hassan and the others had gotten lost in the forest, the landslides or flash floods would have claimed them, the report said. It was a neat explanation, practical and sensible and utterly final. The nearest village sat some 20 kilometers south of the mountain. Even before the crash years ago, the locals had steered clear. They said that the ground shifted after heavy rains in the pass and didn't stay where anybody remembered them. Kamal left not long after. I heard that he left the service entirely, and we never spoke again. Anton called me one overcast afternoon a few months later. A farmer in the village had found a small analog camera sealed inside a waterproof bag. It had been carried miles by the torrent. It was Hassan's. The police brought it in as evidence and developed the film. What emerged was unnerving to say the least. When I arrived at the station, Anton gave me a half-confused, half-disturbed look as he handed me the envelope containing the photos. The first shot seemed almost mundane. A grassy field, remnants of torn clothing scattered across the mud, and a single shoe half buried in the muck. Exactly as Hassan had described over the radio before they went on to comb the mountaintop. Even so, seeing it frozen in a photograph made the scene impossibly real, like I could step right into the chaos. And then the night shots began. Hassan had climbed higher, had reached the rocky ridge and taken more pictures. It must have been right before his last radio call, going by the timestamp. And then, almost as if the camera itself had recoiled, there it appeared. A body lying on its stomach, limbs twisted and decomposing, skin mottled and lifeless. The flash illuminated every harsh detail. The jagged rocks, the dark soil, the ragged edges of clothing clinging desperately to the body. The following frame caught my breath in my throat. A hand that had once curled inward now stretched outward. A leg shifted, the angles subtly different. The torso slightly twisted. At first it seemed impossible, but each frame that followed confirmed it. The corpse was moving, changing positions. By the final shot, my stomach knotted with dread. In the last photograph, the body now lay on its back, and its eyes, foggy and lifeless. God, those eyes will haunt me forever. They stared straight into the camera.